Hi everyone, I welcome you all to this lecture. Today I'm going to discuss a movie named Provoked. It's a very interesting movie, and I'm sure most of you have already seen this movie as it discusses many issues. So, first we'll talk about the introduction part, then we'll discuss all the issues that this movie covers. So, let's come to the introduction part. You see, in introduction part, basically we'll focus on two things. One is the perception of Indian community toward marriage and migration, and the second point would be a description of victims of NRI domestic violence. So let's start with the first point. As you see, the patterns of marriage and migration within the Indian diaspora have generated new forms of abuse that manifest themselves in a wide range of desertion scenario involving new brides. Indian brides experience violence which involves physical forms of abuse, including beatings, sexual violence, or forced uh, servitude, with the most tragic cases resulting in death. In other circumstances, violence manifests in mental torture and harassment for dowry by the spouse and or his extended family, as well as other mechanism of control, psychological harm, isolation, and deprivation of resources. Here, I would like to say that marriages between Indians living in the diaspora and Indians living in India involve contemporary global shifts which produce new types of consumerism in the form of escalating dowry demands, requests for consumer goods instead of money, and the requirement of lavish designer wedding. The important point is that here I would like to add there's an increased desirability to parents to have their daughters seek marriages to spouses living and working abroad. Now, talking about the domestic violence, we can simply say that victims of NRI domestic violence are left with little, or you can simply say that no recourse overseas. To make matters worse, because these women are married, often even their own natural families do not want to take responsibility for them because they have their different perception for that. Some parents fear that their daughters' uh, failed marriage will bring shame upon the family or negatively impact the chances of their other children being able to marry. Moving on to the next part, we'll talk about the campaign which was found in that time. You see, the Southall Black Sisters, the abbreviated form is SBS, was founded in the result of the 1979 uprising against the National Front protest in Southall, London, resulting in riots and the death of the activist uh, Clement Blair Peach. The purpose of this campaign is to meet the needs of Asian and African Caribbean women. It also aims to provide a wide range of services to women facing domestic violence. Uh, it also aims to equip them with the knowledge and confidence necessary to assert their human rights in the face of violence and discrimination. So this is the purpose of Southall Black Sisters campaign. Talking about the next part, it is equally important to relate it with the uh, theme of the movie. You see, in May 1989, the Asian uh, woman Kiran Ahluwalia set fire to her husband. Name is, Deepak Ahluwalia. Following 10 years of enduring domestic violence on a daily basis. As a result, she was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, while her children were left in the care of her parents in law. Kiran was also advised by her trial lawyers that there were no grounds of appeal to warrant reopening the case. At the request of Crawley Women's Centre, Southall Black Sisters became involved in the case immediately following her conviction. Further, the campaign to free Kiran Ahluwalia was SBS, first case in which they supported and campaigned on behalf of a battered woman who had killed her husband. Previously, they had only worked on campaigns where women had been killed by violent men or had committed suicide. Let's take the example of cases of Krishna Sharma and Balwant Kaur. At the beginning, Southall Black Sisters' involvement in Kiran Ahluwalia's case was one of offering additional support by providing the necessary assistance in prison and working on transferring the legal custody of her two sons from her mother-in-law to members of her own family in order to mitigate the lack of contact initially imposed by her husband's mother. You see, Southall Black Sisters knew that their only route to bring justice to women like Kiran was to find ways of reforming the law. For that purpose, while working on the legal aspect of the case, their daily work consisted on concentrating on campaigning for a change in the law on provocation and the injustice done to battered women was firmly established in the public mind. You see, I would also like to tell you something extra here that is equally important. You see, according to English law, there's no automatic right of appeal as Ahluwalia's and other claims unless there's new evidence or material irregularity in the conduct of the trial or misdirection in the judge's instructions to the jury on a point of law, in which case the previous verdict would be dismissed and a new trial granted. SBS lawyer Rohit Sanghvi was hoping to find evidence to appeal on the grounds of misdirection, and for the next 2 years, together with her new legal team, SBS carried out detailed and painstaking work which led to the preparation of her grounds of appeal. As a result, based on new evidence which came to light in it was in September 1991, Kiran was given new grounds of appeal on the basis that the trial judge had in fact misdirected the jury as he failed to mention Kiran's experiences of domestic violence. So this is the about the law. You see, at Kiran's new trial in the Old Bailey on 25th of September 1992, the court accepted her plea to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility, and consequently her tariff was reduced to 3 years and 4 months, which she had already served. Gathering outside the court, a large number of supporters waited and rejoiced as she walked out as a free woman. Although SBS arguments on provocation were rejected, You see, three basic issues they had raised were introduced into the law. Let's discuss one by one. Number one, the notion of cumulative provocation. The history of violence may be taken into account. Secondly, there may be a time lag between the provocation and the incident. Thirdly, the acceptance of the battered woman's syndrome as a characteristic of the accused. In recognition for their work in the campaign to free Kiran Ahluwalia in December 1992, SBS received the Martin Annals Award for Civil Liberties from the civil rights organization Liberty. Now, let me give you an overview of the movie. You see, women victims of domestic violence come from all racial, ethnic, religious, age, and socio-economic groups. The question most often asked is, why do they stay in violent homes? Some of the explanations have been compiled by psychologists into a pattern known as the battered woman syndrome. A number of factors mitigate against escape, including an overwhelming fear which immobilizes the victim, which makes women feel they cannot control their lives. Provoked, a true story depicts the plight of one woman in England and her case, which changed English law. As you know that, once you watch the movie, you'll come to know that on the night of May 9th, May 1989 in London, England, Deepak Ahluwalia is severely burned in his bed while sleeping. Police on the scene find his Punjabi wife Kiran in a state of shock outside. I mean, Kiran is nothing. I mean, this role was played by Aishwarya Rai. Deepak states that his wife set him on fire, and she does not deny it. But her lawyer, Miriam, discovers bruises on her body and learns that she has suffered 10 years of physical and mental abuse at the hands of her English born husband, who views all women as subhuman. Though flashbacks, director reveals how Kiran grew up in the Punjab in India with the hopes of attending college, but was forced into an arranged marriage with Deepak, a friend of the family. While she dutifully looks after him and their two small children, he has numerous affairs with other women. But despite of all the violence inflicted on her body and psyche, Kiran learns from her lawyer that she cannot claim self-defense since her husband was asleep in his bed when the act occurred. As a result, she is sentenced by the British High Court to life in prison. Kiran's cause is taken up by a women's rights group represented by Indian-born activist Radha Dalal. I mean, this role was played by Nandita Das, who is convinced that the law must be changed to accommodate those suffering from battered wife syndrome. While in prison, Kiran is befriended by her cellmate Veronica Scott. Although Kiran tells her that she feels free for the first time in her life, Veronica contacts her brother, a lawyer, to handle the appeal. Yes, moving on to the next part, as you can see on the screen, analysis of the movie. So here we are going to analyze the movie and its important scenes. As you know that Provoked is the true story of Kiran Ahluwalia, a Punjabi woman who moved to London after her marriage with Deepak Ahluwalia. Her husband seemed caring at first, but then began to beat her up. He started drinking a lot and sleeping around with other women. He also subjected her to spousal rape. After 10 years of marriage and having two children with Deepak, Kiran sets him on fire while he is sleeping 2 hours after another scene of domestic violence. He succumbs to the injuries and she is sentenced to life imprisonment for premeditated murder. We can simply say that Provoked is a renunciation of male domestic violence. We find the depiction of the male dominated society where Kiran finds herself in a precarious situations, bearing the brunt of Deepak's frustration. The domineering Deepak is both attracted physically to his wife and beats her when she doesn't fulfill his need. I mean, you can see all these things in the scene around, around after 65 to 67 minutes, you will come to know that this scene is clearly depicted. Deepak behaves towards Kiran as he would do towards a mother figure phantasm. Attraction and disgust combined and violent domination as a response to her demands for mature behavior. So, this situation can be seen in the scene when Kiran inhibits Deepak to have an intercourse in presence of children, as it would create bad impact on their psyche. Here, Kiran is seen to be demanding mature behavior on the part of her husband and to have self control over his lust. But, unfortunately, this genuine demand of hers leads to her spousal rape. Deepak threatens Kiran the with the hot iron. Also, he does not hesitate to push her down the stairs when she's pregnant. A notable scene showed a horrible side of Deepak is when Kiran buys a wool jacket and decides to wear it on the evening. Evening, her husband Deepak plans to take her out to a cinema. He cringes at seeing his wife in a wool jacket and screams at her, telling her to stop dressing like a white woman. He also enjoys tossing his wife down the stairs to deter her from dressing as to copy white girls. You see, Kiran's character reveals a struggle for female autonomy against the backdrop of the patriarchal culture pattern. Her character is portrayed psychologically rather than sociologically. Kiran asserts her feminine psyche. Though protest and defiance, she finally emerges as a new woman, not a stereotypical victim. In a male dominated society, it is the male who shouts, hurls, abuses, bullies, reproaches, criticizes, and is the woman who listens, tolerates, and remains passive. But the iconoclastic New Women rejects the myths of male dominated society. They react violently, and their reaction earns them the sobriquet of being insane or abnormal. This is clearly evident in Kiran's case when psychologists suggest that the only way to save Kiran from life imprisonment would be to prove that she is a patient of endogenous depression, which indirectly meant to prove her insane. To this, Radha Dalal, that means the Nandita Das, angrily responds. She says, "What kind of world is this where a woman has to lose her marbles to get justice, and a man just has to lose his temper?" You see, the movie also speaks very strongly about domestic violence suffered by women. And in recent years, domestic South Asian women in Canada, especially from the immigrant Punjabi community, have witnessed a rise in number of domestic violence victims. You see, before Kiran's appeal, hearing her case was taken by uh, women's group called Southall Black Sisters. We already talked about this group, which is a non-profit all Asian organization based in Southall, West London, UK. The SBS was originally established in order to provide a focus for the struggle of Asian women in the fight against racism, but became increasingly involved in defending the human rights of Asian women who are the victims of domestic violence and in campaigning against religious fundamentalism. They supported her in the case and were eventually successful. They brought Kiran's plight to the attention of the media by organizing rallies and gathering public support. When her appeal was heard in September 92 at Old Bailey, Kiran Ahluwalia's plea of manslaughter on the ground of diminished responsibility was accepted. The judge sentenced her to 3 years and 4 months in prison, the exact time that she had already served. The movie provoked traces her journey from a victim of domestic violence to convicted murder, to the women who changed public opinion towards battered women who killed their abusers. Kiran's legal case also helped change the law. Kiran's successful appeal against her murder conviction set a historic precedent that women who killed as a result of severe domestic violence should not treated as cold-blooded murderers. As Ahluwalia says, "I never intended to kill him. I just wanted him to stop hurting me." When you watch the movie, you will also come to know that there are also some spirited scenes in the prison, especially that women that moment when Kiran unbuttons her sympathetic cellmate's blouse to create a better effect at an interview and whispers bosoms in a reference to a reading class where Kiran has stumbled over that word. But of course, the illusion underlines her contribution to the effort towards feminine empowerment. In the movie Provoked, we find Kiran in jail, surprises a lawyer when she tells her she's at least free there, and she does not fight at first, at convinced she is guilty and sinful. She says, "I sinned, I must pay." When Radha asks, "How do you feel in here? In jail? Are they treating you well?" Kiran replies, "I feel free." Macho culture indoctrination takes time to rub off. Her freedom comes first from the fire she lights on him, a purification process which is her response to the defilement she's endured. That means the spousal rape by Deepak. And then, of course, from the physical distance, from the fear and danger she faced in his presence. And any enclosed space might have done the job. Of course, it's shocking for our freedom built individualism that Kiran said that she's free freer in prison than outside. It was also found on the analysis that Deepak is an over possessive husband in the flashback scene where Deepak insists Kiran to first dance with his friend, and then on returning back home, Kiran has to pay the price by receiving abusive and violent treatment from her husband. Then in the kitchen, Deepak finally attacks Kiran by harassing her. Further, we can also see that Sheila Ahwalia, Kiran's mother-in-law, stubborn and blinded by her son's death, fails to tell the jury about the abusive situation that used to play out in front of her eyes. One scene shows when Kiran is cooking with her mother-in-law, and Deepak bursts is in cursing. He grabs Kiran and begins to strangle her against the wall, while his mother begs him to stop. Despite this, Kiran's mother-in-law denied ever witnessing abuse towards Kiran by making following irrational and negative statement. In imperfect English spoken by immigrants in court, Sheila Awale says, "I see nothing." She very arrogant, always orders Deepak around. She treats Deepak like a servant. The flashback techniques serves to illustrate the different negative shades to Deepak's character: the possessiveness, the suspicion, the infidelity, the inhumanity, the callousness, his utter lack of respect for Kiran to reduce her to something lesser than even a physical entity. Kiran's entry to the jail is set against her entry to her married home, the latter appearing more despicable in contrast to the former. The mother-in-law, being a woman herself, refuses to acknowledge the harassment Kiran has faced over the years. She also forms a part of the mindset of the patriarchal society that we thrive in. The court sentences Kiran to life imprisonment amidst loud protests from women. Kiran considers herself to be a sinner in spite of everything, and doesn't go out to justify herself in the first hearing. The reporter Radha Dalal also fights out her case, underlying the issue and upholding her motto that lost cause is better than no cause at all. With the verdict, there seems to be a ray of hope for many out there with a similar predicament, as the name Kiran itself symbolizes, means a ray of hope. The movie handles the sensitive issue with a strong message that functions as a pointer to the numerous submissive women out there, as Radha quips as if her reputation was more important than her freedom. After a turbulent legal fight, Kiran's sentence was changed from murder to manslaughter. The film grabs viewer from start to finish. If you just watch the movie carefully, you'll come to know that it captures the emotion of the main character incredibly, as well as depicts the unfair judgment that society tends to have. Also, how people from different background, especially women, are misjudged and are not always understood properly. The noteworthy scene is when Kiran is asked to take off her jewelry and clothes at prison, including her Mangal Sutra, a sacred necklace for married women, and her Kara, a traditional Sikh bracelet. She's made to strip her Punjabi clothes for prison rags right in front of the officer. A woman, I mean, you see the situation, see the scene of that movie. A woman who has never even undressed in front of her husband by choice was told to take off her clothes by the jailer. To Kiran, this symbolized a loss of faith and dignity. Another immensely interesting scene is that of Kiran's first lunch at jail, when she is served beef, which her religion, that means Sikhism, forbids her to eat. What is quite interesting about the story is that Kiran never intended to murder her husband. She simply wanted to set his feet on fire so that he couldn't run after her. But once he woke up, she screams and pours it all over him, quickly lighting him on fire. Since we have so much talked about the movie and the different issues, let's come to the conclusion part. As you can see, I mean, truly, this is a shocking film that captures the atrocities inflicted upon the women by insensitive and brutal men with patriarchal ideology. The film also gives a message. I mean, it has got a strong message. It urges the viewers to not turn a blind eye to the evil of domestic violence inflicted upon women, wherein they meekly suffer in silence. So, this is the end of my lecture. Just watch the movie. You will get everything what I spoke about and try to analyze from your point of view also. So, thank you very much. Thank you.